a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
These were young men who were drafted. They didn't get a choice. And they went overseas with the belief that they were fighting for just causes. And they suffered enormously, whether some of the men died, whether they were in the trenches, whatever they had to deal with in this war, they came back and were silent about it. My father was not the only silent soldier. There were many silent soldiers. So my father was born in 1924. And he was raised on a farm outside of Lynchburg, Virginia during the Depression. And he didn't even travel 50 miles from home until he was drafted and sent overseas to the war.
My name is John Waller. I am one of the last living survivors of the Leopoldville tragedy.
On Christmas Eve of 1944, the Leopoldville was torpedoed by German U-boats. There were 2,000 men on board, and over 800 men died that night. But you know, in our lives, when things happen, and sometimes we don't know why, because he had KP duty and was lower in the ship, when the torpedo hit, it hit a different part of the ship, and it was what made it so he could climb up and literally walk down the side of a sinking ship into the icy waters of the English Channel on Christmas Eve. And that was a miracle, and that is why he lived. The French on Christmas Eve got into their fishing vessels and their small boats, and they came out to save these soldiers. I mean, and this is a story that has not been told very often in American history. And it really is a story that needs to be told.
So a mission officially began to retrace my dad's footsteps.
You nearly died here.
I came close.
All these memories that he's pushed down for so many years. In the midst of all the horrors of war, it was the one thing he held on to.
Children, grandchildren have said, I wish I'd asked. I just wish I'd sat down with a picture and said, tell me about this. Tell me what happened with you. I think it doesn't even have to be about veterans and war. It can be grandparents and parents who grew up in a different country, or who grew up in the country in America, or who had different experiences in some way. It's a gift. Most of them want to talk about it. And he said, I do feel a burden has been lifted. And you know, to be part of something like that with your dad is a really precious moment in space and time. But I guess the surprise was that it really mattered to him, and then he could let it go. I just felt so grateful that I could give something back to him that would make a difference in his life. Interviewing my dad about the fears he had, because he was a young man going into war, but the bravery that he showed, and hearing about the other men and some women who were, you know, fighting for a cause they really believed in. I really respected that. And that scene where Dad walked out of the captain's quarters of the ship and was greeted by British and French citizens with people clapping and honoring him, and they came up and they thanked him for his service. And they shook his hand. And I just hope in this world we can get back to a world where we all work together. That was one of the most beautiful things. We were all in this together. And so I hope for our world that we can find a way to be a united world. And that is what I took from this documentary.